So all our rivers in this country have been affected with nutrient pollution to some degree, and it's really an endemic problem across the whole of the country. But under the Habitats Directive, which was an EU directive, we were required to prevent that pollution getting any worse with any new development. So some rules were brought in called nutrient neutrality rules, which meant that anyone building a new development that would add to the pollution load on rivers would be required to offset the equivalent contribution of that development to make sure that they didn't add to the serious problem of nutrient pollution. The scheme wasn't fully set up, but actually there was a very vibrant developing market, and in fact several wetlands have been built to reduce the amount of pollution going into rivers to enable development to go ahead. But last week the government brought in an amendment to the LURB bill, as we now know it, to remove those rules on the basis that it would unlock 100,000 homes. Now the premise for that is actually really wrong. 70,000 of those homes, so 70% of this supposed backlog, have actually got approval. So it's a spurious basis on which to bring forward this legislation. There are also hundreds of thousands of other homes which have actually got planning permission but are not being built because they're being sat on by housing developers. So the premise is wrong. It's a spurious basis on which to bring the legislation in, but it also breaks a promise which the government has made numerous times to Parliament and in writing to NGOs like us who've said that we're worried about environmental protections being weakened post-Brexit, and they've always said that they wouldn't do that. And the Office of Environmental Protection, which is the agency which the government has set up to replace the European Commission to hold it into account, has actually come out very forcefully and said that this is a regressive move and that the government shouldn't do it. The government has replaced the funding that would have come from housing developers to offset this nutrient pollution with a promise of £140 million extra public funding. Now, we think that's too little, and we don't think that the public purse should be subsidising housing developments to pollute rivers. And that budget is very uncertain in the future because we don't know whether or not it will get cut by a future Chancellor of the Exchequer. So we think this rides roughshod over the polluter pays principle, which have been very well set up by these nutrient neutrality rules. But the most extraordinary part is that in the amendment, which is 26 pages of legal text, brought about just at the end of a process with no consultation with environmental NGOs like us and RSPB and WWF, etc., that councils are going to be forced by law to assume that new developments have no extra pollution, even when they're presented with evidence to the contrary. Now, I don't think that that's a reasonable way to make laws in this country, to require councils to take an unscientific view and ignore plain evidence which is in front of them.